How concerned should investors be about just the pace of that sell-off?
Well, I think investors have always been aware that Fosun is one of these big conglomerates that has many different business lines, many of which, may be dividending free cash flow up to the holdco, but many of which may not be. And I think this level of opaqueness is going to hamper their ability to actually get out of this current quandary. But having said that, I think, Fosun can really take an active approach and address their liquidity much more proactively and just talk about their sources and use of cash over the next several quarters.
Do you think the fears about contagion risks are well-founded?
I think overall, the market has really been very focused on the pure play China real estate property names. And what Fosun has shown is that, a large conglomerate with just some exposure to real estate can actually also be hurt at this point. So I do think that some large conglomerates, even though they may not be pure play property exposures, will get a lot more scrutiny going forward. But having said that, I don't think that this is going to be a massive spillover to the rest of China high yield, for example.
So tell us a little bit about the company itself, Fosun's liquidity and perhaps ability to cover its debts.
Well, the company actually came out overnight and explained that they are going to be able to fully repay the 22s and the 23s. So if you recall, just a couple of days ago, they were going out and just doing a partial repayment. And that really spooked investors. And so I think at this point, they do have sufficient liquidity. So if you look at the cash versus the short-term liquidity liabilities, it is rather tight. But right now, the market is not pricing in a default, although the probability is certainly there.
Can there be any real recovery in China credit with the COVID lockdown still ongoing?
That's the $10,000 question, Shery. I think it's really going to be hard for investors to come in with new money. So many investors are standing on the sidelines, just really waiting for China to take on a new COVID policy. And I think the issue is not a question of if, but just when and where, these rolling lockdowns will continue to take place. And as a result, that tends to mute any monetary policy, any fiscal policy that they're implementing to really loosen up and actually stoke credit and growth. And so I think investors will continue to be somewhat wary. However, I think we are beginning to, hopefully see the light at the end of the tunnel, because as we get closer to this level of lack of access to liquidity in the markets, I think the Chinese policymakers will really have to examine their current policies.
When it comes to other sectors that we're, of course, keenly watching, there are more signals that perhaps the regulatory overhaul when it comes to internet and tech platforms may be coming to an end. Are you feeling more optimistic about that segment?
I think that the Chinese policymakers took a very strict stance last year when they felt that they had the policy room to implement many of these policies that they've articulated, things like consumer protection, anti-monopoly laws. But I think this year they've taken on more of a tone of, look, we might have overstepped and we might have been overconfident. And so, they did actually, for example, in the gaming sector, restart the licensing of new games. But it's not clear what's going to actually happen over the next several months. We're hopeful that they will continue on this much more of a proactive and much more pragmatic stance that will hopefully, bring back positive sentiment amongst both consumers as well as companies.
Teresa, how exposed is China to an economic slowdown or potential recession here in the U.S. and even globally?
Well, the dirty little secret is that, the current account surplus, of China versus the United States is, bigger than really, before all of these tariffs come in place. And so no doubt, China is exposed to U.S. consumption. Now, having said that, though, in many ways, China is marching to the beat of its own drum, right? They are going to be a lot less sensitive to inflation than places like the United States because they have, to a large extent, secured a lot of the commodities, and they also have, much more of a conducive relationship with Russia. And so I think China is exposed to the United States, no doubt, but much more insulated than perhaps some of the other countries.